Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Catherine Wilson and Catherine Wilson Gary, and I am the Schools Learning Content Manager at Scottish Book Trust, and I'm delighted to be part of tonight's call with presented by Scottish Book Trust and EmpathyLab and the University of Strathclyde. So we do have a really jam-packed lineup for tonight. Firstly, what I'm going to do is give an introduction to Scottish Book Trust and outline how you can use us. Empathy, reading for pleasure, reading culture. I'm then going to hand over to EmpathyLab, who are going to introduce you to their programme. And later on, we're going to hear from University of Strathclyde and Vanessa Thompson from Oakwood Primary School about what empathy looks like in the classroom, unpacking empathy. And we'll also hear from children's author Maisie Chan, as well as a bit about Empathy Day 2023 and some plans for what you can be doing for that. At the end of today's call, we will have a Q&A. So if you have any questions at any point, please just do put them in the chat. Don't feel like you need to save them, just put them in as we go. And if you'd like to put a Q in front of your question, that just helps us spot it really easily. And that can be for any of our speakers today. So anyone you would like to ask a bit more about. I've already mentioned that we are recording this call, so if you would like to not appear in the recording, do turn your camera off. We are also asking that you keep yourself muted during the call just to minimise any background noise. But if you do need anything, please do use the chat and one of us will come and help you out as best as we can. With all that said, rattled through the kind of housekeeping. Hello and welcome. My name is, I've said, is Catherine Wilson Gary, and I'm here from Scottish Book Trust to talk a little bit about Scottish Book Trust and what you can do with our programmes and resources to promote empathy through reading. So Scottish Book Trust is a national charity that believes books, reading and writing have the power to change lives. We work with people in Scotland of all ages, starting in early years, as well as schools, as well as having departments that focus on reading and writing. And I'm coming to you today from our schools team. This is a very, very quick overview of what we do, but we have live events and tours, which bring book events and author events into schools. Including our Authors Live, which is pre-recorded broadcast you can access online, as well as our sensory storytelling programme for schools or children with additional support needs. We also have school and class awards and accreditation programmes, which I'll talk a bit more about later on, but our First Minister's Reading Challenge is a national award that celebrates classes, libraries, community groups that make a real dedication to a reading culture. And Reading Schools is an accreditation programme with 3 different levels: core, silver and gold, which schools can earn if they have demonstrated working towards a reading culture under our framework. We also do book gifting from primary 1, primary 2 and primary 3 children. Every child in Scotland receives books through our gifting programme from when they are born until they're in P3. We're also developing a kind of offer for teenagers at the moment, which is why there's a kind of coming soon note there. And then lastly, we also have a suite of free resources and CLPL or training for learning professionals, much like today's webinar, but also resources you can access online. So that's us in a nutshell, but digging into empathy. EmpathyLab are going to talk a little bit more about the kind of science of how reading builds empathy later, which is fascinating and very exciting. So just to say, reading projects will promote empathy by virtue of including reading, but I wanted to use this time to look at all the empathetic moments that make up the fabric of some of our programmes. So specifically looking at our reading schools and First Minister's Reading Challenge, which encourage working together either as a whole school, class, group or library to promote a reading culture. Now, reading culture is an environment where children are given regular opportunities to engage in reading for choice, reading for pleasure. They have reading role models, whether that's staff or peers, and reading is celebrated, and it's also part of their learning across the curriculum. This guide that's on the slide, how to build a reading culture in your school, goes a bit more into depth about what a reading culture is and what it looks like, and also suggests some activities that you can use. So all of these elements involve working together as a community, giving children the opportunity to experience empathy and have it role modelled to them by the staff in their school. Our Reading Schools programme, for example, asks schools to create what we call a reading leadership group, where pupils represent their classmates to plan reading initiatives that their school can deliver. This necessitates that schools listen to children and put their interests and feelings at the heart of their delivery. Our programmes also encourage a lot of socialising around books, including reading events, celebrations, clubs, groups, and also that regular opportunity for book talk, where children are talking about what they're reading with their teachers. They're sharing their opinions and perspectives. And again, this is kind of showing children that their feelings about what they're reading matters, and it's helping them develop a bit of that emotional literacy vocabulary. On the slide, you can see this is a piece of feedback from a teacher who took part in Reading Schools, and she said the children are more empathetic and are able to talk about their feelings and the feelings of others. And we also have a picture here of a wall display from the High School of Glasgow, where they were celebrating Reading for Empathy with some of their their favourite reads, and this was part of their submission to Reading Schools. And loads of great titles there that have been picked by the pupils and staff. Our programmes also recognise that schools are not isolated, they are very much part of their community. So our Reading Schools programme at the highest level, the gold level, asks schools to spend some time working with their community to kind of expand that love of reading, run a project to share reading with other people. These projects often require the pupils to think very empathetically. For example, how are they going to share these books with a new group? What kind of stories or genre will that group like? How do they consider the kind of format of the project? How do they shape it so it's accessible and enjoyable for all the other people that they work with? I wanted to share this example. This image here is from Whitburn Academy, who is part of their Reading Schools journey, partnered with Whitdale Care Home, where they arrange weekly visits to kind of share stories, both reading together and also sharing personal stories. And they kind of created this really lovely, long-lasting relationship between the S6 pupils and the residents. So many opportunities there to think about how other people are thinking and feeling, and what project is going to work for them. When we were kind of initially partnering and having discussions with EmpathyLab, something that really excited us about them, and I know that they'll talk about this a little bit later, is their guide. Their empathy reading guide looks at contemporary literature and contemporary issues. And one of their definitions of what they look for in a book that's good for empathy is books that look at topics such as marginalisation, whether that's racism, homophobia, transphobia, or the experience of refugee and migrant children, or homelessness. Really being able to understand specific forms of injustices and marginalisations. And this idea that a huge element of empathy is equipping children to live in the world that we all currently live in. So this interest in contemporary literature is something that is really at the beating heart of all of our programmes. All of our programmes engage with and promote using contemporary children's literature with children. So our Authors Live, which I mentioned earlier, which is recorded live at the BBC and available to watch later on demand in classrooms, engages with current children's authors, including many of the writers and illustrators you can find on the EmpathyLab Reading for Empathy collection. So if there's something that you do read, feel free to look it up on Authors Live, because we might have a lovely broadcast with one of the authors. Our book resources as well, we make sure that our book resources are on books that are published more recently as much as possible, reflecting current titles. I wanted to mention that we partnered with Read Woke South Ayrshire to create resources to help classes reflect on topics like these. So there's a few examples on the screen here. Maisie Chan's first book, Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths, as well as I Am the Subway, which I know is on this year's Read for Empathy collection, if I'm not wrong, which is a beautiful empathetic picture book, and Sharna Jackson's The Good Turn. There's many more titles in those resources, but those are contemporary books looking at the kind of topics that we should be using to teach children to think about the people around them. I also wanted to kind of mention that we
Catherine, you're on mute.
My apologies, I don't know how I did that. I'll hop back in. Apologies, folks. So yes, I want to talk a little bit about cross curriculum. I must have hit a wrong button there. That was quite impressive. So yes, we talk a lot about the importance of reading across the curriculum, and reading is not just something for English class or librarians or English teachers. Our First Minister's Reading Challenge and Reading Schools programmes are specifically looking for evidence of cross-curricular reading in submissions for their award or accreditation. So I wanted to mention how all of our resources are coded with Curriculum for Excellence's experiences and outcomes, many of which tie into health and well-being, which is, as you know, all about looking at helping children develop that kind of emotional literacy, that language around their own feelings and others, understanding their rights and their kind of role in a community. So I just wanted to point towards that as this could tie into kind of those considerations of empathy. They very much make a larger part of the curriculum, and it's not just about boosting skills and literacy. And I have an example here from Perth Academy. As part of their Reading Schools accreditation, their S1 English class worked together with the art department during Empathy Day 2021. Each pupil chose a character from a book and created a piece of art which featured the character's shoe. Some of the learners were talking about kind of what it would be like to walk in their shoes, and they kind of did all this research into what the shoes could kind of mean about that character. So again, it doesn't just have to sit in English, it doesn't just have to sit in that more health and well-being, it can also expand across the curriculum. And as you'll all know, health and well-being is a cross-curricular focus. So lastly, I wanted to give you 3 of the best places to start with Scottish Book Trust to kind of go and look at later. So firstly, we have that guide I mentioned earlier on building a reading culture. So that will give you a look at what a reading culture is, suggested activities, events, a kind of to-do list, which you can adapt and tick off as you go. We really do encourage you to adapt that for your school and think about it from an empathy perspective. And so you could weave in empathy with reading. If you're interested in reading schools, we have a quiz which will tell you what level of reading schools you're ready for. So you don't have to start at core, you can work your way up to silver or gold. But that link will also take you to the Reading Schools website, so you can spend some time looking at the framework, look at what you're already doing or anything you would like to run. And lastly, this Schools Events and Opportunities webpage, this link takes you to a web page that gathers all of our upcoming programmes in terms of events, tours, CLPL, live literature, anything else that you might like to apply for. So I know that's been quite a rushed look through our programmes, but hopefully these are 3 good places to go and get started, and we'll make sure to send these links over. That's it from me, and thank you so much for listening to my section. It now gives me great pleasure to pass on to EmpathyLab, who are going to give a bit of an introduction to their programme.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Miranda McKerney. I'm one of EmpathyLab's founders, and it's really great to be here with you. It feels like a really timely gathering as Empathy Day approaches on June the 8th. And when arguably the need for empathy strategies, for empathy education has never been greater to combat the divisions in society and help young people overcome the many challenges they face, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic. You've probably seen, as we have, a recent report from the National Centre for Children and Families, which is really sad finding that children are experiencing real issues with socializing, forming relationships and managing their emotions. So empathy particularly significant in that context. So I'll be filling you in on Empathy Day a bit later. We really hope you'll all get massively involved. But first, just a little bit of context about empathy and the tools that we at EmpathyLab can offer you to help raise an empathy educated generation. Because imagine how powerful it would be if every single child understood what empathy is, why it matters, how it works, and then consciously put their empathy skills to work to help build a better world, a better one than my generation has managed. So that's our dream. And I'm going to start slide sharing. Are you seeing those okay?
Yeah, we are.
Fab. So, as I say, just a bit of context, what actually is empathy? This is our definition: the ability to feel and understand other people's emotions and perspectives, and an absolutely core life skill. This is not a fluffy thing. Empathy is vital for successful relationships, to help us collaborate, and it's absolutely essential for learning. And then very importantly for us, we see empathy as a force for social change as empathy is put into action. Experts' understanding of how empathy works in humans is changing all the time. It's really hard to keep up with all the research, but scientists certainly at the moment agree that our ability to empathise is made up of three elements: the feeling or affective aspect of empathy, which happens automatically. We resonate with other people's emotions. The thinking or cognitive aspect, where we use our reason and our imagination to understand other people better. And then the acting part, because once we've really understood how someone feels, we're inspired to help them to take action. If you think about it, it's a really remarkable of our human abilities. We think of it as a superpower, and that's our theme for this year's Empathy Day, of which more later. The exciting thing from an educator's point of view is that empathy is learnable and it grows the more we use it. Only 10% of our ability to feel and enact empathy is genetic. 90% is from social factors. And EmpathyLab specialises in using books and contacts with authors to build empathy, understanding and skills. We were sparked into being in 2014 by our interest in a building body of scientific research, which we find really thrilling, about what happens when we read. It's complicated, but in a nutshell, when we read stories, many more areas of our brains light up than when we read facts, and that makes reading feel incredibly real. So when we experience the feelings of book characters, those feel really real too. And this helps us understand how other people work. So reading is a really safe way for children, that empathy educated generation, to build their understanding of people who aren't them, their viewpoints, their perspectives, their feelings. Since we started, we've been exploring very lab-like which interventions could be most powerful in exploiting the potential of the power of stories to build empathy. And we now offer an annual Read for Empathy collection of around 60 books for 3 to 16-year-olds, each one chosen to do a very specific empathy building job. A range of support for schools, including an in-depth schools programme, which we'd love to see lots of Scottish schools take part in, Empathy Day every June, and a really interesting programme of innovation with authors and illustrators, since they, and it is amazing to have Maisie with us tonight, are the creators of those amazing books which build our real life empathy. And we're about next week to add another tool to that toolbox, an empathy handbook for 7 to 12-year-olds called We've Got This, which explains the science of empathy, how empathy works in humans, then suggests 6 very practical, really creative steps to build that human superpower. And it's written by the incomparable Rashmi Deshpande, publishes on 18th of May. We'd love to see this in every home, every school library, made heavy use of by parents and teachers alike. You can see the pre-order link there on this slide. We'll be streaming the launch on May the 18th. So if you're interested in that, do put it in your diary, and there's details on our website. So just to end my little section for now, I wanted to say how happy we are to be building our partnerships in Scotland with Scottish Book Trust, Strathclyde University, Scottish Library and Information Council, CILIP Scotland. We have a Scottish librarian, Graham Fairweather, on our judging panel for our Read for Empathy collection. And lots of schools are starting to join in Empathy Days. So we're looking forward to many, and we hope really enduring, partnerships with you all as allies in this empathy movement, because as 6-year-old Omar, out of the mouth of babes, age 6, Omar said, after experiencing last year's Empathy Day, empathy can change the world. So I'm going to hand you over now to my fellow founder, Sarah Mears.
Thanks, Miranda. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for sticking to time. I'm the chief timekeeper here, so I'm monitoring time very carefully. But it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Maisie Chan, who's hopefully somewhere on the screen. There she is. I can see her. Maisie is a British Chinese children's author based in Glasgow, and her debut novel, Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths, won the Jalak Children's and YA Prize in 2022, and it was shortlisted for the Blue Peter Book Awards and the Diverse Book Awards. And her second novel, Keep Dancing Lizzie Chu, was shortlisted for the Audi Glasgow School Book Award and the Juniper Book Award. And both of those books have been on our Read for Empathy list. So Danny Chung was last year and Maisie is this year. So we're a big fan of Maisie's work, because we know that there's a lot of empathy in those stories. So Maisie's also been really helpful to us in terms of Empathy Day. So Maisie, I just wanted to start by just asking you sort of why you're such a supporter of EmpathyLab and particularly Empathy Day.
For me, empathy is one of the things, one of the emotions, one of the key things that I want to do with my books. I think that as a British Chinese author, you know, I've experienced racism myself. I've wanted to create books where British Chinese characters seem human and normal and not othered, and empathy is one of the key things that I look to do. And when I found out about EmpathyLab, I was like, wow, this is such a brilliant thing, because I think children don't know what empathy is. You know, when we're younger, we might learn about sympathy and feeling sorry for someone else, but we don't really learn about trying to walk in the shoes of someone else and to understand where other people have been or where they've come from or what they're going through. We just see sometimes, especially a child, they just see, oh, that person's acting like that, so that must be how they are. Where if you can kind of help them peel the layers back, then they might understand that actually someone's going through something that they're not telling you about. So I'm such a big supporter of Empathy Day, and luckily both of my novels have come out on both Empathy Days that you've had, and it's really such a thrill for me to, you know, be part of Empathy Day again this year. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I think that thing about peeling back the layers, that's what books are so great at, and the characters in your books, we'll talk a bit more about them in a minute, but you know, that's what they do. You see a surface character, but gradually you get to know what's really going on and what they're really feeling. So could you just tell us a bit about what you're going to be doing on Empathy Day this year?
Yeah, so I'm taking part in Mission Empathy, and I was paired with Sue Hendra, who I'm such a big fan of Sue Hendra. She's a writer and illustrator, and you might know her book Sweet Potato, and she's got a book called I Need a Wee, and I used to read that to my children, and I just loved it. And so I was so thrilled to be partnered with Sue, and we are doing an empathy exchange, which really is active listening for me. It's like taking time to get to know someone through a series of questions. So there's 8 questions that children have come up with. So they're not even from EmpathyLab, you know, it's from children themselves. And some of the questions are so sweet, and really thoughtful questions. For example, one of them that Sue asked me was, how would I cheer you up if you were feeling down? And I just thought that's so sweet. We don't ask people that. So it was such a lovely thing to get to know Sue, because as I said, she was someone that, you know, I've read her books to my children, and it was just lovely taking time to get to know each other and ask each other these questions. And so they'll be available for people to download on the, you know, on the day as well.
Yeah. And we love those questions, and I thought that they're not questions that adults would think to
No.
ask, are they? And that was what
No,
made them
not
so
at all.
special. And had you met Sue before?
No,
No.
it was the first time. So I was like, oh, it's Sue Hendra. Like I was really fangirling. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I think you know, you do get to know people really well through those. And I think
Yeah.
what's lovely about those, and we had something slightly similar last year, although not written by children, but those kind of empathy exchanges actually help you get to know the author, you know, authors better. So it's not just the two having the conversation, but you know, I really remember those conversations from last year because they were really deep and rich. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that on Empathy Day. So if you see the Empathy Day program that Miranda will probably share in a minute, then you'll find out when Maisie's on, and do watch that. And Maisie, we've had both Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths and Keep Dancing Lizzie Chu on our E for Empathy lists over the last couple of years, as we've said, and we've loved them because they both include such memorable characters that readers can really identify with. I think they give insights into a culture that some readers will see themselves maybe for the first time reflected in, and for others it will help them understand a culture that's different from theirs. And both of those things, that sort of windows and mirrors thing, are important parts of empathy. And so I suppose I'm really interested, what inspired those two stories?
So I'll start with Danny Chung. So if you haven't seen the cover, that's the cover for Danny Chung. So this one started when I met my friend's grandma. She had moved to Birmingham from China and she was 92 years old, which I just thought was amazing. You know, she'd left the country where she'd lived all her life and suddenly she was in Birmingham. And so I wondered what she would do to make friends. I was kind of concerned, what would she do to make friends? This was in my mind. I didn't ask her actually, or ask her granddaughter. And so I just thought, oh, she could play bingo and then maybe she wouldn't be alone and she could make friends. So it was kind of a real person that I met. And then I just had this kind of fictional, what if this grandma moved in with her grandson, but he's not able to communicate with her? How is he going to deal with that? And that's kind of how that started. And it starts off where he's really upset about it. He doesn't want her in his room. She's a stranger to him, basically. So it's really, the book's about their relationship and how he overcomes his own prejudice and becomes more empathetic actually to his grandma, because at the beginning he doesn't like her at all. She's in his room, taking up space. He's got no privacy, but he has to look after her during the Easter holiday. But through the book, you know, he gets these empathy skills, really. You know, he learns from her, even though they can't speak the same language. It's about this human connection, and he sees how other people treat her. And I wanted to look at how kind of immigrants were treated, and so there's a whole bingo hall where we can see that taking place. And it was sort of inspired a bit by Brexit as well, because I wrote it a couple of years after Brexit, and so there was this kind of feeling of division and xenophobia, and so I was kind of looking at that, but in a story where, you know, for children. And Keep Dancing Lizzie Chu, which is my second novel, which is on this year's Read for Empathy collection, it is sort of based on myself. I was a young adult carer for my dad Ron, who had dementia later in life, and so I wanted to explore that relationship. So Lizzie's around 12, she's just turning 12 in the book, and her granddad, who she lives with, is not acting as he normally would. And so I wanted to use my own experiences of that and put those into the book. And they're also grieving. So I wrote this during the pandemic, and so I showed how people grieve differently. Like, she gets very busy and he kind of breaks down a bit. And it's really her. The book is about Lizzie's journey in asking for help. and so they go on a road trip, and her friends are quite interesting characters, and they meet people along the way. And so it was really about kindness, like the strangers that we meet along the way, and how people can be really kind as well. So that's where they both sort of started off, you know.
I was really moved, I must admit, by Lizzie Chu and her grandfather and the relationship between them. And I got a real sense of this 12-year-old girl who was like struggling against such big issues like bereavement and dementia that she's not quite understanding. And but at the same time, she's having to be far more adult than she should be, but yet she's still desperately trying to be the child that she is. And I just wondered, I mean, you talked, I think, a little bit about that sort of building up the layers of a character and you know, understanding the kind of the nuances so that readers also understand them, so that they're presented in a way that children will understand, but they have all this complexity about them. I just was really interested about how you do that, because it's amazing.
Yeah, so thank you. So Lizzie Chu isn't me, so it's not really like an autobiographical novel, but I do put my emotions, so what I felt when I was, you know, looking after my dad, I put those emotions into the character. And then I look at stuff just like, what does this girl like, what does she dislike, what are her interests, what does she want to do but is being stopped, you know, what's stopping her, and who are her network, who are her best friends, what is it that she wants. So I'm asking all these questions and trying to build a picture before I start the book. And then I look at, you know, I was at a thing in London with educators, and somebody said that my books have family in them, because often in this age group, for 8 to 12, often parents, they're abroad, or they're away, or the children at boarding school because they want the adventure to start for the children. But they felt mine had, you know, were looking at relationships, and actually I didn't realize I did that, but I think I like people and I want to look at these relationships and I guess help children understand a bit more about British Chinese people, that we're actually like everybody else, we're human. So I want this universal aspect of the character and the books, but then also I'll put in things about being British Chinese, like maybe experiencing microaggressions or racism. And so it's kind of a balance between having a universal character, but then also a character that someone else might learn about, that you know, so it's kind of but it's put all these things together
and doing it in a really compelling way that makes them just characters that you really engage with. I think that's the key thing, isn't it?
They're flawed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm conscious of time, and it would be lovely to carry on talking to you, Maisie. But I do want to ask you one last question before we finish, which is, what is your empathy resolution going to be?
So my empathy resolution is to read more books from other countries, so more translated books. I think, you know, if we can learn about different cultures and different people, then actually we can have empathy for people that don't have the same religion, the same culture or customs or home life as us. And so I'm planning to read more books from different authors from around the world.
Oh, it's brilliant, a brilliant insight. So just thank you so much, Maisie. That was brilliant and fascinating to talk to you as well. And I'm really happy now to be handing over to Jenny Carey, who's going to introduce the next session. And thanks again, Maisie. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Maisie. So from listening to you, certain things came through in your discussion: identity, community, connection, book choice and voice. And I think through all of the presentations so far, that's been at the heart of what we've been saying, which I think we would all agree connects with empathy, connects with how we define empathy and how we act it out in our daily lives and interactions. So I'm Jenny Carey from the University of Strathclyde. I'm co-presenting with Vanessa Thompson. Vanessa, you going to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Vanessa Thompson. I'm head teacher of Oakwood Primary School in Easterhouse in Glasgow.
So today Vanessa and I are going to talk about our professional experiences around building empathy at university and school level in Scotland. So I want to share my slides first of all. Let's see if this is an easy job. Yep, can you see that okay? Good, and slideshow. Okay, here goes. So at Strathclyde, what do we do? What do we hope to inspire in relation to building empathy and building teachers with the capacity for empathy that links with their literacy curriculums? 3 things spring to mind when I asked myself this question. First of all, we try to build a view of an empathetic and equitable curriculum. That's key to our interactions with our students within initial teacher education. Sorry, I hope you don't hear my dog barking in the background there. We ask students to position children as readers alongside teaching reading. The third thing that I think we encourage is a knowledge of books and literature that connect with children's lives. And how do we do this? We do this by using the Strathclyde 3 domains approach. In this approach, we don't just look at the cognitive domain, which is the top of this diagram. We look at the way that cognitive knowledge and skills, cultural and social capital, and identity and agency connect. And in that intersection, we have the child that we are connecting with. So at Strathclyde, we think about cultural and social capital. Now, when we're thinking about cultural and social capital, we ask our students to unpack those children's virtual backpacks, which links directly with Pat Thompson's work alongside funds of knowledge. And when we talk about cultural and social capital, we think about networks, we think about children's experiences, we think about children's interests, and we ask future teachers to connect with this in relation to book choice and voice. We ask them to see the children that they have in front of them. We ask them to think about the way that community links with what the children know and how they position themselves as readers. Reading as a social practice, not just reading words. And in turn, how that connects with the sort of literature that we offer in our classrooms. For us, this intersection links directly to identity and agency, how children see themselves as readers, how they feel positioned by others when we think about reading and being a reader. How does that link with empathy? If we're positioning a curriculum always as cognitive knowledge and skills, then what happens? What happens is that children start to see themselves as deficits. They start to limit their potential in terms of the way they connect with books. They start to think that they have to be recommended books instead of connecting books that will enrich their life, connect with their own life stories, connect with understanding, that walking in other people's shoes, the journeys of others, and understanding multiple perspectives of ways people live their lives, and ways that books connect with their lives. So for us at Strathclyde, what we try to do is build this equitable and empathetic curriculum. We try to ensure that our students think about experiences, interactions in spaces, and books, children's literature that is up to date and connects with children's cultural and social capital, their values, and their aspirations in terms of seeing other people's world views. And this is at the heart of how we hope to frame and position literacy learning and teaching and build and generate a knowledge of books and children's literature, which is why at Strathclyde we connect with people like Vanessa, we connect with people like EmpathyLab, and of course we connect with Scottish Book Trust, who have been to quite a few of our events, because we have to make sure as staff that we understand the that we upskill ourselves in terms of the book choices that are out there. So I'm handing over to Vanessa now to give us a wee bit of context about how this looks in practice. Vanessa, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Jenny. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So in front of you here, a few slides, visual pictures of members of a wider community, reading mentors who work in our school, actually mentors that are linked through Strathclyde University. As Jenny said, that Oakwood and Strathclyde Uni work very closely together. And whilst we work closely together in all sorts of opportunities that are building our connections and building empathy, I think it's important just to kind of put a marker, if you like, in Oakwood's movement and progression through to where we started, and our involvement in how we use and have empathy as a core of just kind of moving our school forward. Just as a bit of background, Oakwood was an amalgamation of 4 schools that came together 15 years ago, around about that time, from 4 very distinct areas in Easterhouse, areas that were clearly defined by gangs, gang lines that didn't meet, families didn't cross, didn't join. And so when the 4 schools came together, it was really hard. That's probably an understatement. And the school experience was a very challenging, very difficult one with, as you can imagine, groups of people who just did not want to come together. And the relevance of this, and why I'm telling you this, is that our route to being able to build a community that became one was through connections, and it was absolutely through developing skills and understanding, using empathy of a way of being able to see and walking that other person's shoes. And that was literally another person who was in their class but had a very, very different experience and background. And we did that. Huge time commitment for that, in that whenever there were difficulties or disagreements or conflicts, that we would prioritize helping children talk about how a situation made them feel, what that looked like, then think about how their person wanted to react to that feeling, and then what could we possibly do that would move that situation on. And so that undercurrent of really building empathy and empathetic skills, absolutely not being sympathetic if I've done a particular thing, but actually understanding how it meant for somebody else to feel, has enabled us as a school to be able to move forward and really have a very strong, cohesive community, so that we can have a point where we are now, very much a feeling of one big school group, which really builds all of our partnerships that continue to build a community. But we've done it through building connections, and we've done that through building empathy. So that our school experience was a huge shift, which enabled us to support the health and well-being kind of core principle for us, but it's through an empathetic route. So that's my kind of intro to Jenny. Push that slide on so that we can think about how we develop and think about our route of belonging, really, and how we view and value those connections as within a school. These pictures really just show you the kind of joy that we have in school, and the joy that connections bring us, and the joy that actually even having a difficulty that you need to resolve brings when you're able to understand how somebody else feels about it. We do that in many ways in Oakwood. We also use text and language as a way to be able to build and connect. This is actually in the Children's Mental Health Day. We use opportunities of bringing our families in constantly in terms of just sharing moments in time, small or large or significant. And we're actually going to be building on this event actually for Empathy Day, as our children are deciding that they are going to be building on the connections where they were looking about attributes, and they were thinking about their family members, of what they liked about that person, actually what attributes they have, not what they look like. We created a whole school family of connections, and our children are deciding that they're going to develop that theme to have the parents and the wider families back in again. We use, as a school staff, very much the Strathclyde 3 domains approach in terms of taking time to really know and understand our school community. And it's only by taking time to understand the school community, asking questions, being with them, finding out about families, knowing who their cousins are, knowing what their their experience that they are living and is real to them at that time, asking questions, that we are able to be in a position where we can help our children really know and connect and empathise, not just with each other, but with a curriculum that is relevant to them. So in terms of agency, identity, that's something that is absolutely fundamental, and it's really central to the experiences that we develop for our children. So I'm thinking about how we might build that, how we build the community and the kind of empathetic curriculum in terms of our school support. It's one where we think.
So Vanessa, that's one of our questions, isn't it?
Is it? It's also my.
It is.
Is the next slide? There you go. Look.
Yeah, there you go.
Seamless, Jenny. Seamless. I have so much to say, but I am pushing on because I'm conscious of time. Really, I'm conscious of time because when we think about our Jenny describing that in terms of the funds of knowledge, we have to really know and understand our children and give opportunities where we can have really meaningful experiences where they continue to talk about their understanding, where they can continue to share that, for that to be a way to continue to develop their experiences. Books do that in such a natural and relaxed way for our children to kind of practice social situations that perhaps might not come up within their normal experience. It gives them an opportunity to be more vocal and have conversations about their feelings, where perhaps they might have some reticence or shyness. If you're engaging with a character, then you can talk about your own feelings through that character. That absolutely allows children to have a better understanding of themselves and their position in the world. That kind of ties into you thinking about their identity and agency, but it also allows them to have conversations with their peers about how somebody else is feeling. I think it was Miranda that mentioned that, post-COVID, when we are thinking about how we recover from isolation, any opportunity that we can that allow our children to engage in meaningful conversations, the use of books, such an kind of important natural way to do that. Any conversations that we can encourage, those are really important, because we are definitely noticing in Oakwood that that level of connection that we had pre-COVID most definitely has taken a huge knock. And we are having to really work harder again to get back to that point of the connections that we have, and our children have more kind of conflict resolutions that need to be supported. We do that a lot in Oakwood, in that our children are trained to be peer mentors, so they actually help and ask the questions that we would do as as adults to support an understanding and empathetic understanding. Our children know the importance of this so much that they volunteer to help the younger children resolve their difficulties using key questions to be able to help an empathetic understanding. We develop our school by taking an interest in the environment, in the world outside us, to be able to kind of place yourself at that centre and then look outwards. We need to always be offering opportunities where we can explore and feel and have a sense of responsibility and pride in how we help each other. We have our children are mentors to each other across ages that support, again, an empathetic understanding of different levels, whether that's cognitive understanding or emotional understanding. Sorry, Jenny, I'm conscious that I'm
okay, and we're
talking a lot.
No, that's given us a really good foundation, because I think that in terms of building empathy when connecting with books, you have to contextualise that in terms of your interactions, experiences, and the spaces you create within school curriculum and within the school day. But we're going to turn to reading now.
Yeah.
What can you do to support children to become empathetic readers?
Yeah, you've got to connect with them on a very deep level. Okay, you know, that deep immersion in a character really allows such a depth of understanding, because it allows an understanding of inference and deduction, prediction, and levels of conversation that allow and support experiences that perhaps our children absolutely haven't got an understanding of. But also in a world where we are, you know, in our inclusive society, where we have families coming in who are asylum seekers, who are seeking refuge for whatever reason, having books where you can discuss and empathize with a character and experience absolutely enables us as classes and as schools to be really inclusive. We support our children, I think, to be empathetic readers by allowing them to absolutely talk about whatever their reactions are without any judgment. We have to allow that their views of what they're seeing and what they're thinking, and doing that in a really safe and secure place, allows them to talk through their feelings. And so I think that's a very important thing, to allow and support children to be empathetic readers. We've got to give them the space to be able to discuss how they're feeling.
So that's beautiful. It kind of connects with what Catherine was saying about Aidan Chambers' work in 3 Sharings, but also about building that identity and reader identity, and the way that connects with book choice. So moving on to our final question, I'm looking at time, and I'm aware that we don't want to run over. Why does book choice and voice matter for children, from a perspective of children, but also what implications does that have for a teacher?
Yeah, so it matters for a child because children, all of us, we need to be seen. They want to be able to recognise themselves. They need to know that actually learning, education, the world that they're in and they're immersed in is absolutely about them. So book choice, voice absolutely matters because they need to know and see themselves. But book choice also matters because they also need to be able to see other people's worlds that they don't know about. So those 2 things really matter. And actually the 3, if you could think back to the 3 domains, those questions, the understanding of that absolutely is crucial for us as teachers to really dig into and understand, because they help us be able to identify, because, you know, for us as educators, finding the books that absolutely relate to the interests or the identity of the children who are in front of us. So the books that are in the classroom that are currently in our primary 1 might not necessarily be the same. There will be links and there is commonality, but you absolutely have to look for the things that either are interesting to them or that matter or are relevant, which is why you need to know your community. You need to know your children. You need to have an understanding that also changes, because each year you've got your I could tell you about my neighbourhood profile, but my primary ones this year are different to my primary ones that I had last year. They keep us on our toes.
Okay, you know, thank you. So you have to have that book knowledge. You have to connect with Scottish Book Trust, with EmpathyLab, to ensure that you're upskilling yourself and you have that book knowledge. Would you agree? So last quick question before we hand over to Miranda. What are you doing for Empathy Day?
Me. So we're building on our the Children's Mental Health Day. I think I mentioned that, and we are actually asking questions. Actually, Maisie was speaking about that. That our children are deciding it, because our children do lead our, you know, they lead our learning in conjunction with the teachers. But they are deciding the things that they're going to want to find out about their families and about each other. Just helps a further understanding. We're hoping to find out new things.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to hearing about that, Vanessa. And I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Miranda. How was that for timing, Sarah?
Oh, thank you. And thank you both. And Vanessa, that was so inspiring. It's so wonderful to hear an educator kind of looking at their school through an empathy lens in that way, and so many connections to how what we're learning in our lab, and the importance of curiosity in empathy, you know, really understanding a child and the way books can help us do that. Thank you. That was really, I really loved that. So I'm going to run us through a very quick outline of Empathy Day and how every single person here, I hope, can get involved, which is very much from now. And I hope you all agree with the kind of underlying premise that the world will be a very much better place if empathy strategies and practices were much more injected. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Oh, I'll just actually try and remember. I always forget to put the sound on because I'm going to play you a little quick video of authors with their empathy resolutions. So are you seeing that? Okay, great. So the Empathy Day is a major part of EmpathyLab's year-round work to make every day an Empathy Day. It's in our toolbox because days, as this United Nations slide says, can educate and mobilise people to address global problems and celebrate humanity's achievements, and our ability to empathise, I think, really is one of those. So we founded Empathy Day in 2017 to create a focal point for debate, for action, and which celebrates and grows empathy's power to create that better world. And critically for us, and I think all of us here, to develop a much better, deeper understanding of the role of books in raising an educated generation. We have a specific set of aims for young people, which I think you all can get behind, to help young people learn more about empathy, to build specific empathy skills, to experience empathy through rich encounters with books and authors and illustrators, and crucially to be inspired to drive change by putting empathy into action. And our target is to be reaching 1 million children a year by 2026. So we're making good headway. In 2022, that last maroon bar, you can see we were around 403,000 children, but we really need everybody's help. We really want to benefit more and more children with this work. So please get involved. So these are the main elements of this year's campaign. There's the underpinning Read for Empathy book collection, details already available on our website, a Mission Empathy Challenge with 5 powerful empathy boosting activities, an online festival called Empathy Day Live, which is what Maisie is in, with the most amazing array of authors and illustrators modelling those same 5 challenges. And we've introduced a new element, a sort of bridging element between Empathy Days called Empathy Action Month, where we're asking everybody to kind of revisit the thinking and the action from June and look ahead to the following June. So we aim to make learning about empathy really creative, really fun and author-led. And Mission Empathy this year urges us all to develop our superpower to change the world for the better. And it has those 5 activities that I referred to help us do that, and a certificate if you do all 5. And I'll quickly run you through the activities. The first is basically a massive crowdsourced sharing of ideas for empathy boosting books. Tying in with the power theme, the idea is to do a power pose with your favourite empathy boosting book. Scottish Book Trust did some amazing ones last year with people up ladders and things, kind of going, yeah, this is my read for empathy. So that's very much a thing to share online. Empathy 360 invites everyone to stop and really look around their community through empathy eyes, maybe taking an empathy walk. And it asks people to reflect on what they see when they look through those different empathy eyes. It's linked very much to taking action. Where would more empathy make a difference? And what positive social action steps might everyone take? Empathy exchange is the activity that Maisie was talking about, to step out of your normal bubble and connect with somebody maybe you don't know very well. It uses the prompt questions written by young people that Maisie was talking about. And Maisie is doing it on the day in a film with Suhendra at 10:30. That's the primary version. The secondary version is a wonderful exchange between the authors SF Said and Joanna Nadin. A big part of empathy is about being able to name and understand and share your feelings. And this year we're asking groups and classes to create empathy emotion maps, doing it as a shared activity throughout the day. And on our website are the most wonderful emotion maps from illustrators, leading illustrators who've contributed their ideas as a kind of stimulus for that activity. And then down the bottom is probably the most important activity of the day, which is to make an empathy resolution. And you've heard Maisie share hers. So this is about, what are we going to do having done all the Empathy Day activities? What are we actually going to change in our community or in ourselves? And it can be small but really significant steps. So one of the ones I loved most from last year was from a primary child in year 5 saying her empathy resolution was not to judge people before she'd really got to know them. And I thought, oh my goodness, if we could all manage to do that, the world would be a very different place. So thrillingly, those same 5 activities are modelled by leading authors and illustrators in the online festival on the 8th of June. These authors are playing a very different role. They're empathy role models, and we really have thought carefully about how we curate their input, and I really urge you to use these films. They can be watched live on the day but used at any point afterwards as well. So there's everything from Jacqueline Wilson, Frank Cottrell Boyce, Hannah Gold, Shana Jackson, Suhendra to Rob Biddulph, who's ending the day with a really wonderful empathy theme, Draw with Rob. And the day kicks off with Children's Laureate Joseph Coelho leading a really fab Empathy Day assembly with a special Empathy Day poem. So I'm just going to play you a very few of the author empathy resolutions.
My empathy resolution, it's to make less assumptions and to actually take the time to ask people more questions and to find out what's really going on.
When I see somebody isolated or being bullied or being treated as a bit weird, instead of just not joining in, to go and stand by them and to be their friend.
I want to try listening properly to everyone so I can totally understand what they're saying.
Is to reach out to others, even when it might feel a little bit hard.
To try to understand. I feel like a lot of the world's problems are caused by people misunderstanding each other.
My empathy resolution.
So that's a sneak preview, but I hope it gives you a feel for the sort of vibrancy and quality of the author input. It's a very different way for you to work with authors, and I urge you to kind of harness that. These are the resources that are freely available to you. All you need to do is go on our website and just register to receive them. We've poured our hearts and souls into these, so we want everybody to be using them. So if you're going to do one thing after tonight, register for your free resources. They all come, the toolkits come with some really fab resources: empathy superpower glasses to see through somebody else's eyes, a listening switch, empathy resolution bunting, bookmarks, posters. There's a real wealth of resources. There's also a family pack, which we hope families will make huge use of, but also schools will encourage their families to download and use this. You don't need to register for, it's freely available on our website. Now it's the same mission empathy activities. No need to print it. It's very kind of resource light for families who may be struggling with cost of living issues. There's some amazing author online events coming up that we hope you might be interested in registering for. Mr. Dilly on the 24th of May, a Puffin virtual visit with Lee Newbury on the 26th. And one of our aims is to help people learn more about empathy professionally. So there's tonight, next Tuesday, a really interesting webinar about the connection between reading for pleasure and empathy that we're running with World Book Day, and some really leading academic, Teresa Kremen, author As Dasu, who wrote Boy Everywhere, and John Biddle, leading teacher in the Reading for Pleasure movement. And then next week, it's really busy for us. We launch our book on Thursday, and we'll be live streaming a really fascinating panel debate with the author, with our psychology partner, Robin Banerjee, who's head of psychology at Sussex, and a leading head teacher. So do join in with that if you can. These are all the contact details you need. So please join in. We need our young people to be surrounded by empathetic adults like Vanessa, given the chance to develop the empathy skills they need to thrive, communicate, contribute. This is part of preparing for the future of the Curriculum for Excellence asks. So please join us in this drive to make a more empathetic world.
Thanks, Miranda.
That's me done.
Thank you. Thank you. So we do have a little bit of time for questions, and I haven't seen any in the chat yet, but there was a comment from Christine which talks about reading and empathy, not just the preserve of classroom teachers. And I think I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, but perhaps Vanessa to start off with. But I would just say absolutely. I mean, we think reading and empathy is a preserve of everyone: families, public libraries, community organisations, but particularly in school, everyone in school. But Vanessa, I'd love you to just comment on that.
Okay, thank you. That is absolutely true. It's absolutely important. But if your school community actually is in an area or of families that have low, poor literacy levels, where children at home are not witnessing and seeing families that are reading, then actually it becomes the preserve of what's happening in school, and actually that's why it's really important that schools develop partnerships where they can bring other people in to read. One of the things I think I mentioned was that we do have reading mentors who come into schools, so the children have an opportunity to read with adults that are not adults that are their teachers or a support worker. It's another adult who's showing an interest and discussion and talking about books, and that's a reading mentor scheme that actually is currently through Strathclyde Uni. I'd suggest to anybody, get in touch, find out about that. That's definitely helped support a kind of a more of a wider culture for us in terms of allowing children to recognise and see that reading isn't just because they're in a classroom. You know, it most definitely has helped. You know, actually, I would say that and suggest that in terms of reading and identifying with characters and being able to kind of develop and talk about it, actually that has helped our children just choose to read for pleasure because they're interested in finding out a little bit more about that particular character or more about the author. Jenny, I don't know something you use, because obviously I can talk about the literacy circles and how that's supported.
Yeah, I was going to come in there too and just say that what the mentorship programme helps with is position reading as an enjoyable and pleasurable activity. So it's important that reading is seen not just as that cognitive, within that cognitive domain, but as a low stakes social activity. And I think that sometimes we can be so overly focused on the cognitive aspects of reading that because we're busy in schools, that's the truthful part of it, we are busy and overloaded ourselves, that low stakes social talk that is at the heart of Aidan Chambers' 3 sharings approach becomes less, it positions reading as a more of a high stakes activity. That's what I'm trying to say. And what you're talking about, Vanessa, is that whole idea of reading being low stakes, social, and a conversation, connecting with books, connecting with people.
I like that.
And the more conversation that you have, the more you elaborate and support the context of that book, or the context of the story is actually something that enables just a kind of a wider enjoyment. And actually we definitely find that the children who are reading and having that social conversation about it, actually their reading fluency develops as a result, because they're relaxed, because they're enjoying it, because it becomes kind of a lower stake social activity.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we found is that that sort of reading aloud, because it takes all the pressure off, and actually you can just immerse yourself in the book, and it becomes a very enjoyable experience and a very empathetic experience as well. So, and I've noticed Mrs. Sinclair talking about Dungeons and Dragons and that whole role play approach as well. And again, that's something else we do a lot of, sort of immersing ourselves, immersing the readers in the text, and really allowing them to see through the eyes of the character, really thinking themselves into the character, stepping out of their skin and into the character's skin. I'm very conscious of time, but I wanted to ask you all, I think Maisie's here as well, so you don't have to answer this because it's a big question, but if you could say one thing that's the single most important thing you would want to ensure to build empathy in children's empathy in Scotland, what would it be? And I'm going to whiz you all round to say one thing very, very quickly. So I think I'll start with Catherine, as she's at the bottom of my screen.
I think with my kind of reading hat on is, I think that reading for pleasure and giving children that time to read for pleasure in their communities, whether that's their schools, their libraries, at home. I think that is one of the most valuable, and letting them choose, I should say, reading for pleasure, letting them choose what they want to read, and whatever form that takes.
Thank you. And Maisie, anything from you?
Can you repeat the question?
Is one thing, if you could, one thing that you would use to build children's empathy in Scotland, what would it be? Or anywhere actually, but
I think that fun element, that they can have fun empathy as well, and actually it's good for them. Like when you're kind, actually it's good for your cells and your body and your mental health. So it's good for you as well to be empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Miranda.
Yeah, I think for me that's a really mean question, Sarah,
I know
actually.
it is. Not empathetic at all.
But I think for me it's about the books and the care with which books are chosen, and that they're very, very contemporary. So for me, sharing our Read for Empathy collection with everybody on an annual basis, and having those books in every library because they've been very carefully chosen by a group of experts, that would be one very concrete thing to do. Okay. And everybody doing Empathy Day, of course. Yes, so that's two things.
I shall have words with you later about that. And Jenny.
I think for me it's going back to building social contexts for reading and chatting about books, and ensuring that that book talk is valuable and just builds human connection, and I think in that low stakes context, that's how we do it. That's how we build human connection. We make it fun, Maisie, don't we? We connect with it, and don't position it as a high stakes activity.
I really like that definition of reading as a low stakes activity. So yeah, great. And Vanessa, I'm going to leave the last word to you.
Okay, I would read for connections for each other, for ourselves, for how we fit in the world, because actually reading for connections, you have to do with empathy. Absolutely, is about moving forward society. Brilliant. Big things. Read for connections.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and well done all five of you, because that was a hard question and you all rose to the challenge magnificently. So thank you so much for that. So I'd just like to first of all just to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers, to Catherine for all of Catherine's organisation, to Jenny for finding speakers and for that wonderful interview, and for Vanessa for your just inspiring talk about your school. And Maisie, thank you, and thank you for all the wonderful books and all you're doing for EmpathyLab, and thanks to Miranda for presenting all of those exciting things that we're really looking forward to on Empathy Day. Thanks to Scottish Book Trust, the University of Strathclyde for we've really enjoyed this partnership with you. So yeah, have a great rest of your evening, and thank you very much for joining us.